Every man wants to walk his daughter down the aisle and feel like the proudest person in the room. I thought that was going to be my day. I thought after 31 years of doing it alone after her mother passed when she was 6, after the night shifts at the plant and the winters, I skipped my own doctor's visits, so she could have braces that this was finally the payoff. Emily had become someone, a hospital administrator, engaged to a cardiologist. She had a condo overlooking the river and a future that looked nothing like the trailer we grew up in outside Toledo. And I was her father. I was the one who got her there. The invitation came on a Tuesday. Heavy cardstock, navy ink. Her fiancé's family crest embossed at the top like something out of a magazine. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time just holding it. My hands are rough. 40 years running a lathe at Fenwick Machine Works does that to a man, and I remember being almost afraid to smudge the paper. I thought about her as a little girl, riding on my shoulders at the county fair, asking me to fix her bike chain, asking me to walk faster because she wanted to beat her own record home. Now she was going to be somebody's wife. I told myself, this is what it was all for. I don't have much. Never have. My name's Walter Kessler, and I retired 2 years ago, on a pension that covers the mortgage, and not a whole lot else. I do small engine repair out of my garage now, mowers and snowblowers mostly, cash jobs, enough to keep the lights on and buy my granddaughter's birthday presents when my son's family visits. So when I thought about what I'd wear to my daughter's wedding, I went straight to the closet and pulled out the one suit I own. Charcoal gray, a little shiny at the elbows now, bought off the rack 22 years ago for my wife's funeral. I wore it again when Emily graduated nursing school. I wore it to my own father's burial. It's not much to look at anymore. The shoulders don't sit right on me the way they used to. My back's not what it was, but it was clean and it was mine, and it was the only suit I had ever needed until now. A week before the wedding, my daughter called me. I could hear it in her voice before she even said hello, that tight, careful tone she gets when she's rehearsed something. "Dad," she said, "we need to talk about Saturday." "I'm counting the days," I told her, and I meant it. She was quiet for a second too long. The venue is the Ashford Manor. Derek's parents are covering most of it. His father's on the board at Cedarbrook Hospital. Dad, half the surgical staff is going to be there. It's a big deal for Derek's career. For mine too, honestly. I understand, sweetheart. I've got my suit pressed already. She sighed, and it wasn't a tired sigh. It was a frustrated one. The kind she used to give me in high school when I embarrassed her in front of her friends. "Dad, that's the gray one, right? The one from Mom's funeral? That's the one. Dad, please." Her voice dropped low, like she didn't want someone in the room to hear her say it. "Derek's family, they're going to have photographers there. Real ones for a magazine feature even. I need you to look. I need everyone there to look like they belong. Can you please just get something new? Please? For me?" It landed in my chest like a dropped wrench. But I didn't argue. I never do, with her. I told myself she was stressed, that brides say things they don't mean, that this was her day and I would give her whatever she needed to feel right about it. "Okay, honey," I said, my voice not quite steady. "I'll take care of it." That week I went through every consignment shop in 3 towns. I priced out rentals at the mall. Even the cheapest package was $94, and I'd already spent $40 on Emily's wedding gift, a hand-tooled leather photo album I made myself in the garage, every page stitched by hand because that's a skill my own father taught me before the machine shop ever did. I thought about asking my son for the money, but he's got 2 kids in daycare and I wasn't about to make my problems his. So I did what I always do. I took my old gray suit to the dry cleaner and had it pressed within an inch of its life. And I told myself it would be enough. I told myself she'd see the effort and not the label. The night before the wedding I sat on the edge of my bed and I prayed, the way I used to when things got hard after her mother died. "Let her see my heart," I asked, "not the suit." Saturday came in bright and clear, the kind of blue sky morning that makes you believe things are going to go right. I put on the gray suit, straightened the same tie I've had since 2003, and looked at myself in the mirror above my dresser. An old man looked back at me, tired around the eyes, proud though. I drove my '09 Silverado the 40 minutes to Ashford Manor, and the closer I got, the more the world around me started to change. Modest ranch houses giving way to stone gates and circular driveways, valets in white gloves waving Bentleys and Range Rovers up to a columned entrance the size of a courthouse. I parked at the far end of the overflow lot because I didn't want to hand my truck keys to a valet in a truck that old. I walked the length of that parking lot in dress shoes that pinched, past cars that cost more than my house, and by the time I reached the entrance, my collar was damp with sweat despite the cool morning. Inside, the ceiling soared 2 stories. Chandeliers dripping crystal, the smell of lilies so thick it made my eyes water. I felt like I'd wandered onto a movie set and forgotten my line. I found a seat near the back, hoping to disappear into it. I did not disappear. Derek's mother, Marjorie, a tall woman in emerald silk with a string of pearls that probably cost more than my truck, was seated 2 rows up. She turned, looked me over slowly, my shoes, my sleeves, the shine on my elbows, and leaned toward the woman beside her. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the shape of her mouth, the little curl at the corner, and I heard the laugh that followed, sharp and quick, cut off like she remembered where she was. The woman next to her glanced back at me and smiled the kind of smile that isn't really a smile. 2 young men near the aisle, cousins of Derek's, I'd learn later, kept glancing my way, whispering, one of them lifting his phone and angling it in my direction like he was framing a photograph of something curious he'd found. He showed the screen to the other one. They laughed behind their hands, and a cluster of young women in blush-colored dresses stood near the flowers, and as I passed to find my program, I heard one of them murmur to another, just loud enough, "Is that the father of the bride?" And the answer, lower but not low enough, "God, I hope not." I kept my eyes on the altar. I thought about Emily at 7, asking me to check under her bed for monsters, and I made myself small in that chair and I waited. When the music started and Derek walked out to take his place, I watched him scan the crowd, and I lifted my hand to wave small, hopeful. The same wave I gave her at every school recital. His eyes found me. His face didn't soften. It tightened, just for a second, his gaze dropping to my shoulders, my sleeves, and something crossed his face that I recognized because I'd seen it before, years ago, the day I told him I couldn't help co-sign an apartment lease. Disappointment. Then he looked away like I was something to be managed rather than someone to be greeted. I stood when Emily came down the aisle. She was luminous, and for one clean moment none of the rest of it mattered. Not the suit, not the whispers, not any of it. I clapped along with everyone else, but underneath it I felt hollowed out, sitting in a room full of strangers who had already decided who I was. At the cocktail hour, I found a corner near the terrace doors and tried to hold a glass of water like it was a job I'd been assigned. A hand landed on my shoulder, and I turned, already smiling, hoping it was my daughter. It wasn't. It was a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, silver at the temples, wearing a tuxedo that fit him the way a good tuxedo is supposed to fit a man, like it had been built around him. This was Raymond Okafor, Derek's father, the hospital board member, the man footing the bill for the marble under our feet. He looked me over the way his wife had, but slower, and when his eyes reached my jacket, they stopped. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he reached out, not aggressively, almost gently, and took hold of my lapel between 2 fingers, feeling the weight of the fabric, running his thumb along the stitching at the edge. "Where did you get this suit?" he asked. His voice was quiet, and I couldn't read it. I braced myself for the joke. I bought it off the rack, sir, a long time ago," I said. "Had it altered myself, though. I do a little tailoring on the side. Learned it from my father." I don't know why I kept talking. Something about the way he was looking at the seams made me feel like I had to explain myself before he laughed. He didn't laugh. His eyebrows drew together, and he turned the lapel over slightly, studying the inside seam like a man reading a signature. That's when Derek found us. He came across that terrace like a man walking into a fight, and by the time he reached me, his hand had already closed around my arm. "Dad, what are you doing?" he said, low and furious. I told you to get something decent." He turned to Raymond with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Dad. He doesn't really understand occasions like this." "Derek," I started. No, he wasn't loud yet, but he was close to it. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire surgical department. Do you understand that? Everyone is looking at us right now. You look like you walked in off the street." People nearby had gone quiet. The way a room does right before it becomes a scene. And I told you not to do this to me. Ever. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it, even though I didn't fully understand yet what I'd done wrong. I did the best I could, son. Your best isn't good enough, he snapped, and something in me cracked open, quiet and total, like ice giving way under weight you didn't know was there. You need to leave. Now, before Emily's boss sees you like this. Emily was coming across the room, her dress catching the light, her face already twisting into confusion and then something worse. Derek, what's going on? Nothing, he said. Your father was just leaving. He gripped my arm and steered me, not gently, toward the side entrance, past Marjorie's pursed smile, past the cousins lowering their phones to watch, past every single guest at that party. I'm sorry, everyone, he called out behind us, loud enough for the room. He gets confused about how to dress for things. It's a generational thing. He pushed the door open and put me through it like I was something being returned. Go home, Dad. I'll call you when things calm down. Eh? The door shut. I stood in a stone breezeway between the ballroom and the parking lot, the music muffled behind glass. My own heartbeat, the loudest thing in the world. 63 years old, and I had just been thrown out of my own daughter's wedding like a man caught trespassing. I walked. I didn't look back at the building. I walked past the valet stand, past the long hedge of white roses, out toward the overflow lot where my old truck sat alone among a sea of luxury cars. And I thought about her mother, how in the last years, before the cancer, she used to tell me I'd never be enough, never make enough, never be enough of a man for the life she wanted. I thought I'd buried that particular pain with her. Instead, it turned out I'd just been raising it, feeding it, sending it to college. I was almost to my truck when I heard heels on the gravel behind me, fast, uneven, someone running in shoes that weren't built for running. Mr. Kessler, please, wait. I turned. It was a young woman in a bridesmaid's dress, holding the hem up so she could move, her face flushed. I didn't know her. I found out later her name was Priya. Emily's college roommate and maid of honor, and behind her, moving fast for a man his age, came Raymond, his bow tie already loosened, his jacket left behind somewhere in that ballroom. Mr. Kessler, Priya said, reaching me, breathless. I saw what happened. We all did. It's fine, I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. I shouldn't have come dressed like this. I embarrassed her. Rio. No, Priya said, and there was real anger in it on my behalf, which was a thing I hadn't expected from a stranger. No, you didn't do anything wrong. Raymond reached us then, breathing hard, and he didn't waste time. That seam, he said, the one at your lapel, that's a hand-pick stitch, done the old way. No machine does that anymore, not like that. Where did you learn it? You. My father, I said. He tailored suits back in the 50s, out of our garage in Toledo. Taught me everything he knew before he passed. I don't do it professional-like, just enough to keep my own clothes decent, patch things for neighbors sometimes. Raymond's face changed. Something in it softened and opened at the same time. My father was a tailor, too, he said, quiet now. Lagos, before we came here. He sewed every stitch of clothing this family owned until the day he died, and not one person at that party tonight has any idea what real craftsmanship looks like anymore. I haven't seen a hand-picked stitch like that since I buried him. I didn't know what to say. My throat had closed up entirely. When I asked where you got that suit, Raymond went on, I wasn't judging you. I was trying to figure out if I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. And I was. He looked back toward the manor, and his jaw tightened. My son just threw out the most honest man in that entire building. Priya took my hand. Emily doesn't know the full story, Mr. Kessler. Derek told everyone you were his exact word, was unstable. He told people you couldn't hold a steady job. He told his mother you'd never really been involved in Emily's life. She shook her head. I've known Emily 8 years. I know that's not true. I know you raised her by yourself. She used to cry telling me how hard you worked so she could go to nursing school. Something in me that had been holding very still for the last 20 minutes finally let go, and I had to look up at the sky for a second so I wouldn't fall apart standing in a parking lot. Come back inside, Raymond said. You are not leaving this wedding like a man who did something wrong. You didn't. I don't want to make a scene at my own daughter's. There's already a scene, Priya said gently. Right now, it just has the wrong ending. I let them walk me back. My legs didn't feel entirely like my own. Through the terrace windows I could see Derek pacing near the head table, and when the door opened and he saw the three of us coming back in, his face went through about 4 different colors. Priya, what is this? He said, catching himself, flustered. Dad, what is he doing back in here? He's my guest, Raymond said, and his voice carried now, calm but pitched to fill the room. And I would like everyone's attention for just a moment. The band, mid-song, faltered and stopped. Conversation died in patches across the room until the whole ballroom had gone quiet, 300 people turning to look at a father-in-law with his bow tie undone standing beside a man in a shiny gray funeral suit. Derek, Raymond said, I want you to apologize to your father-in-law. Derek let out a short laugh, glancing around like he was waiting for someone to laugh with him. Nobody did. Dad? Come on, look at him. This isn't. I told him to dress appropriately, and he didn't. That's not on me. That suit, Raymond said, was hand-stitched, using a technique it takes years to master. I know, because my own father did the same work with his own 2 hands until he died with a needle callus still on his thumb. This man learned it from his father the same way I learned respect from mine, and you called him unstable. You told my wife he never worked, and you told my son-in-law's own colleagues he was confused. He turned to the room. This man raised his daughter alone after his wife passed. Worked a lathe for 40 years so she could become the nurse standing at that altar today. And on her wedding day, his own son-in-law threw him out of the building for wearing the only suit he owns. You could have heard a pin land on that dance floor. Marjorie had gone the color of the tablecloth. The 2 cousins who'd been filming me earlier were suddenly very interested in their shoes. Emily was standing near the head table in her wedding dress, and I watched her face move from confusion to horror to something that looked like grief all in about 3 seconds, all directed at her new husband. Derek, she said, is that true? You told them Dad never worked? You told them he was unstable? Baby, I can explain. Explain? She said. Why you'd rather lie to a room full of strangers than let your own wife's father sit at a wedding in the only suit he could afford. Her voice cracked on the word afford, and I saw 28 years of her childhood pass behind her eyes, all the sacrifices she actually did remember, whether he'd ever bothered to ask her about them or not. You threw my dad out. I was trying to protect the day. I didn't want anything to. You didn't protect anything, she said. You protected your own vanity, and you humiliated the one person who never once, not one single time in my whole life, made me feel like I was too much or not enough. She looked at me across that ballroom, and I saw her as a little girl again, standing at our screen door, waiting for me to come home from the plant. Dad, she said, and her voice broke completely. I am so sorry. Raymond wasn't finished. He turned to Derek, his voice dropping into something colder and more final. The partnership at Cedarbrook that I arranged for you. Consider it withdrawn. Tang. I do not put my name and my hospital's reputation behind a man who treats family like an inconvenience to be managed. You'll find another sponsor if you can. Dad, that's my whole career. You can't just... I just did, Raymond said. Emily stepped between them, still in her wedding dress, and looked at her husband of 90 minutes like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. I need everyone to give us a minute. And, she said to the room, and then, quieter, to Derek. How could you be ashamed of him? He gave up everything for me. He gave up remarrying. He gave up vacations, a bigger house, everything, so I could have what I have. And you couldn't give him one afternoon of dignity. Afternoon. I stood there in the middle of that grand room in my funeral suit, watching my son-in-law come apart in front of 300 witnesses, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, just quiet. Like a held breath, finally let out. Son. I said the word came out before I could stop it. Force of habit toward a man who was, for better or worse, now family. I don't need you to grovel in front of your friends. I need you to understand that respect isn't something that turns on and off depending on who's watching. Derek's face crumpled, and for a second I almost felt sorry for him, watching everything he'd built for that afternoon collapse under its own weight. Almost. And, and, Raymond reached into his jacket, then remembered he'd left it behind, and instead just clasped my shoulder with a hand that had real weight in it. Walter, he said. I hadn't told him my first name. Priya must have. I own 3 tailoring shops in this city. My head cutter is retiring in the spring. I would be honored, honestly honored, if you'd consider coming to talk to me about it. A man who can handpick a seam like that shouldn't be doing it in a garage for strangers' curtains. I didn't answer right away. I looked at the card he pressed into my hand, at Emily crying against Priya's shoulder, at Marjorie staring at the floor like it might open up and take her somewhere else. I'd be glad to talk, I finally said, and my voice held steadier than I expected. Emily walked me out herself later that night, past the valets, past the roses, all the way to my old truck in the overflow lot, still in her wedding dress with her shoes in her hand. I should have asked you straight out if you needed help with a suit, she said. I should have just bought you one. I was so worried about what his family would think that I forgot to think about what you'd feel. You didn't do this, sweetheart, I told her. You didn't put your hands on me and walk me to that door. I'm still sorry, she said, and hugged me the way she used to when she was small enough to wrap her whole arms around my leg instead of my shoulders. Derek called the next morning, and the morning after that. Long messages explaining he'd been under pressure, that his mother had put ideas in his head, that he never meant for it to go that far. Emily filed for an annulment 9 days later. Turned out there were other things, other people, that came out once Raymond started asking around his own social circle about the man his daughter had married. I didn't gloat over any of it. I just kept my phone on silent and let it happen the way it needed to happen. I took Raymond up on his offer that spring. These days, I run the alterations counter at his flagship shop downtown, teaching 2 young apprentices the handpick stitch my own father taught me 60 years ago in a garage that smelled like coffee and machine oil. I make suits now for men who could buy the whole shop outright, and not one of them has ever laughed at my hands. I still live in the same house I raised Emily in. I don't need anything bigger. It's got her height marks penciled into the door frame in the kitchen, and I'm not covering those over for anybody. But my closet's got 6 suits in it now, every one of them made with my own 2 hands, not because I need 6 suits but because I can, because for the first time since her mother died, I feel like the effort I put into this life actually shows. Emily comes by most Sundays now. Sometimes she brings takeout, sometimes she just sits at the same kitchen table where I first opened that wedding invitation, and we don't talk about that day much anymore. We don't need to. What I learned, and what I'd tell any father listening to this, is that the people who really love you were never counting your suits, or your bank balance, or the car you drove up in. They were counting the years you showed up. And if somebody in your life can't see past the fabric on your back to the sacrifice underneath it, that says everything about them and not one single thing about you. Hold on to your dignity. It's the one thing nobody can ever repossess.